The Brooklyn class were the first American light cruisers designed and built after the various naval treaties were signed. The previous light cruiser class had been the Omahas, which were built immediately after the First World War. Their small size and light construction had been found to be inadequate, especially since the American Navy faced the issue of having to operate across the Pacific with very little support infrastructure such as shipyards and refueling bases. There were a number of considerations that therefore affected the design. The ship's range and speed needed to match the 8-inch armed heavy cruisers, which meant they needed to reach at least 32 knots. The London Naval Treaty restricted displacement for 10,000 tons, and the Japanese Mogami class were armed with no less than 15 guns of 6-inch caliber, and so the American ship would have to match this. As it turned out, the Mogami class was actually an attempt to build a heavy cruiser in disguise, and their triple 6-inch turrets were swapped for twin 8-inch turrets in 1939, and the Japanese had also secretly ignored the displacement limits. However, it wasn't all bad news, because the Japanese turrets were limited to about 5 rounds a minute, whereas the Americans, along with the British, responded with 6-inch weapons that had a much faster rate of fire, 8 to 10 rounds a minute in ideal conditions in the Brooklyn class's case. This meant that each ship could in theory send no less than 150 main gun rounds downrange at the enemy every minute, which changed the attitude of the General Navy Board considerably with regards to the usefulness of light cruisers. 8 5-inch anti-aircraft guns and 8 50 caliber machine guns formed the rest of the armament, since the US Navy had decided not to carry torpedoes on their cruisers due to the risks of catastrophic explosion if they were hit by enemy shells. During the Second World War, many ships of the class would receive updated 5-inch guns and several dozen 40mm and 20mm guns to augment their firepower, although the exact number and type of guns varied on a ship-to-ship and year-to-year basis. They also received a wide variety of surface search, aerial search, and fire control radar sets. The ships' hulls themselves were based on the New Orleans-class heavy cruiser hull, and in turn, this would influence practically every other US cruiser class ever built. The St. Louis subclass was derived from the Brooklyns with a revised armour scheme and engines, and newer 5-inch guns in twin mounts instead of single mounts. Other classes, which used variations on the ship's hull design, included the Cleveland and Baltimore class cruisers and the Independence and Saipan class aircraft carriers, plus the unique cruiser USS Wichita, a ship that was effectively an American equivalent of the Mogami class, being an improved Brooklyn-class hull armed with 8-inch guns, albeit in 3 triple turrets. The class comprised 7 ships: Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Savannah, Nashville, Phoenix, Boise, and Honolulu, all of which would serve in and survive the Second World War. That's not to say they didn't come close to losing ships. The Boise took severe damage at the Battle of Cape Esperance in 1942 when a shell penetrated the ship's forward magazine. Ironically, the shell damage also caused flooding, which prevented the magazine from exploding and taking out the entire ship. At the end of 1944, Nashville was hit by a kamikaze that killed or wounded more than a third of the entire crew complement, and Honolulu was torpedoed in 1943 by an enemy ship at the Battle of Kolombangara, and later, after repairs, was torpedoed again by a Japanese torpedo bomber in late 1944 during the invasion of Leyte. Finally, Savannah was hit in late 1943 by no less than a German Fritz X guided bomb, which blew out the ship's bottom. Only exceptional efforts by her crew saved the ship, and the last 2 ships were rebuilt with extra bulges against torpedoes and new 5-inch guns in a similar layout to the St. Louis class. All the ships saw extensive action and were responsible for the destruction of many enemy ships and aircraft, but due to the number of ships and their numerous actions, it's impossible to cover them all in a 5-minute guide. Individual ships can be covered in their own videos upon request, as will be the case with USS Phoenix. The ships had varied careers after the war. The rebuilt Honolulu and Savannah were retained by the US Navy. Although decommissioned in 1947, they were only scrapped in 1959 and 1966, respectively. The Philadelphia was sold to Brazil in 1951 and served as the Barroso until 1974. At the same time, Brooklyn and Nashville were sold to the Chilean Navy and served as O'Higgins and Captain Pratt, with the latter ship being renamed again as Chacabuco in 1982. In these guises, Nashville was scrapped in 1985 and Brooklyn lasted until 1992 when it was sold for scrap but defied the shipyard by breaking its tow rope in the middle of the Pacific and sinking by itself. Finally, the Boise and Phoenix were sold to Argentina. Boise served as the 9th of July or Nueve de Julio until 1978 when she was returned to the United States for scrapping. The Phoenix was renamed the 17th of October, or 17 de Octubre, until 1956, when she was again renamed as the General Belgrano and continued to serve the Argentine Navy until she was sunk by the British submarine HMS Conqueror in the 1982 Falklands War. But that is a story for another time.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.